This is my first appearance after leaving school for 22 years. It's the first time I've ever done anything in Nigeria, so it's kind of emotional for me. I want to thank my mom for being here. And Data, who is my sister's friend. Data knows how to be a friend. My sister is no longer alive, but she's been in touch with our family, and so has her entire family. So, excuse me for being emotional. Thank you. I'm going to start way back when. I went to Queen's College, Yaba, Lagos, here in town. So this is kind of an old homecoming, and I thought I'd go back to one of my first collages that taught me a lot. I did this over midterm. My mom came to Lagos, stayed in Ikoyi, and it was the first time that I learned actually being an artist wasn't a bad thing. The periods that are put in between other things that you do that are important, like math and so on, is when you make art, when we have empty spots. And for those of us who took art seriously enough and wanted to pursue it, people just regarded you as somebody who wasn't smart enough to do other things. You know, so it was like you did art because you're silly or stupid, or you did cookery and needlework because you're going to be a good wife. And so it wasn't really an easy thing to sort of pursue art as a female in that context. So I was making this collage over break as part of my assignment, and my mom was cutting out pieces and making suggestions and allowing me to put it together. And then that's when I realized that it was okay actually to be an artist. So in some ways I was actually a closeted artist for a while. Okay. So one of the things you're going to notice is this is called Fan Fan. This is Fan. And this is structures where the ceiling fan is standing still and the buildings rotate. I think this is indicative of where I come from. I always think it's a really good introduction to my work, just because the idea or the concept of thinking about how hot somewhere is tells you where I come from, you know, that I'm grounded in African culture, contemporary African culture that I've lived with. So with Fan, the idea is to take these ostrich feather fans that royalty fanned with, you know, all those emirs, and then take a small electric fan that you either motorize, that you use a battery to operate, or you can use electricity to operate, and then speak to this idea of kind of the act of how electricity or battery allows even somebody like me who is not royal to be fanned. So the objects actually have the option for you to turn on the electric part or to actually use the hand. And in a cultural context where electricity is available and then not, there's an ongoing toggling that goes back and forth with availability of electricity and lack thereof. So that's what this piece is about. This is Fan. And of course, this is an ordinary raffia fan that anybody that's not royalty can fan themselves in. And I mounted to combine it with an actual ceiling fan, because I do know that, again, that act of how we're modifying things and how they modify us and how you pick up a fan or use the ceiling fan depending on what's available. That's sort of the reality of contemporary African existence. So with this structure, this is from my second year in university, like after I graduated and I was in school, and the earlier pieces are much later, but this is where these whole other pieces come from, this piece. With this idea is, I found myself at the Kansas City Art Institute going to school, just moved from London, And I was thinking a lot about how disorienting cultural dislocation is, because you move from one culture to another, there's just a lot. It sort of hits you over the head. So I thought it would be interesting to have the ceiling fan be static. And then I'm using the motor of the ceiling fan to sort of have the rooms revolve. So they rotate really slowly. And I was thinking about how I'm coming from a different cultural context, and we live supposedly on a planet that's moving constantly, but we're not aware of it. So I wanted to sort of heighten that awareness of the movement and the motion of both the earth, and also sort of how perception matters in terms of how you see things, because you could be actually in a car and it might feel like the trees are the ones that are moving and not the car. So that's what these pieces are about. So this is my graduate thesis. This is called Bewitched. And what I did was I decided that, you guys know Elizabeth Montgomery's Bewitched, right? I used to watch reruns of that when I was little here in Nigeria. And what I liked about that was this notion that these chores can be performed, which, I mean, I really still think all the technology we have in terms of domestic chores, it really seems to not quite be there in terms of, like, it requires a lot of time and energy still from you to do that. So the technology isn't quite there. But what I decided was to use that idea to perform different chores. So this sieve's flour, this is like a kind of ornament that people keep in their houses that ends up becoming a toy after you're married for your children. And then I have it pecking on grain. And then there's the calabash, dipping the blouse down in it, kind of washing action, a big broom that sweeps. And then over there, there's yogurt being churned into butter. So I motorized this all with car batteries. The work explores the impact of technology on culture. Technology is both a subject and a medium of the work. Technology is used as a metaphor for power dynamics, which is important to me. Really, I'm not really talking just about technology. I'm talking about infrastructure. I'm talking about electricity, which we seem to still struggle with this far away from the 1960s independence. So these are the kinds of things I'm concerned about and interested in. So that's why it's a metaphor when I make these things, and that's what the interest in technology comes from. It comes from living here, understanding what the difficulties are and the challenges just to do your daily living. The intent is to explore how media diversely impacts our realities. We're going to look at some of the still image collages, which talk more about that than this sort of installation-based work. The focus is on technology as a catalyst for human condition and not technology as a fad. So I'm not actually interested in technology by itself as an end or a means. I'm really interested in the impact of what happens to our humanity in relationship to technology. How do we modify it, how it modifies us? That's what the focus is for me here. This is Girl Talk. This is a piece made of about 72 different images compiled together. So these ideas, even though I do shoot a lot of images and use Found magazine stuff, the ideas only really primarily exist in my head until the images are made. So this is about 72 images put together. Both with the still image works and the video works, I bring together images to examine cultural nuances. The actual meaning of the work exists primarily in between the elements that I bring together. So otherwise, of course, with the disparate parts, unless they're put together, we're not going to be able to read it. This is sort of really, I'm a student of semiotics, so that's hence why I think of it in those terms. Looking in between cultural products and structures as a way to understand how media technology diversely affects the daily lives of people, which of course you can see here. A lot of this idea, the notion of ring, is not indigenously Nigerian or even West African. It is just sort of through colonialism and introduction of both different cultural ideas or religions that we've come to adapt that. But now the issue is, right, the the point of the ring isn't sort of a question of a token of love, but I think there's a kind of lack of modesty and interest more in how much the bling costs and so on and so forth. So these are sort of what I'm touching on, and I think that comes from sort of how media impacts what people expect or what people think in terms of how to use that. Similar, I would go back and echo the previous speakers and say, similarly, hence this notion that the people that we see in the media become the most influential people and the people that we looked to. So similar idea. Focusing on the internal relationships of the individual within the image tempered by the surrounding power structure. I'm cutting up images of photographs of people that I've taken. My first duty and priority, especially in the context of being somebody living in the United States, is understanding the history of the difficulty that the black body has gone through. So I do it with a lot of respect and sense of delicacy in terms of not cutting up, no dismemberment of the bodies, and just tweaking things to sort of speak to the conversations that I want to have in a more poetic way than trying to take apart the bodies of the people. And at the end of the day, what I'm talking about, even though I'm using images of people, is a sort of larger political power dynamic. This piece is called At the Meat Market, and with this, I'm thinking of a bunch of different things. One of them is, of course, the objectification of the female body, regardless of which kind or what color it is. And so hence this sort of metaphorical juxtaposition with the meat market. And then I'm also thinking about the fact that it is sad that we still live in a world where there is human trafficking and slavery in existence. So that sort of, those are the things on the forefront of my mind, specifically in relationship to females and women. And then this is at the water tap, and I was thinking, I'm really pleased to see that in Nigeria we moved away sort of from political military dictatorship periods, because I think there's a palpable, tangible atmosphere that creates with the presence of people in particular kinds of uniform. I think it's not as easy for people to feel as citizens we can move freely or we can engage in certain ways. So at least we're moving closer to, I have a lot of hope, and we're moving closer to where I would like to see this country go. So now I have a short clip from one of my video collage works. And usually what I do is I find footage that is popular and known, like this footage, which is from Aliens. So I think as a collagist, one of the things that I do is I take something that's familiar and I alter it. So this is one of the ways that I insert my own version of the narrative that doesn't include people that look like us or even Africans in the narrative, and shift the conversation. And that's sort of part of what I'm trying to do here.
Please put your arms up and follow our instructions. She has no file.
So my thinking is the question of our civil liberties, as every country, even outside of the West, everybody has Facebook and all kinds of social media, and information is being collected. And as you know, living in the US, I'm acutely aware that recently children who were incarcerated as refugees had their DNA samples taken. And the question that I'm trying to engage is this notion of the reach, right? So there are laws to protect people within the, say, the context of the US in terms of what can happen, even though even there's problems with civil liberties. But the idea that for the rest of us, it is questionable what exactly would happen, because who is going to protect us? So these are the kinds of things I'm thinking about as I do these sort of interventions, for lack of a better term, into popular videos. So this is a piece called Feifeng Gramophone that is a play on language, and that has to do with this notion of, if you know the raffia discs, those feifei, which people use to sort grain, cover food, pick up something, or if you have a baby, it's a girdle, they wrap your belly with it on there to flatten it. So I like this sort of multi-purpose use. And the word for the gramophone, for feifei, in Hausa, when you say feifei, that's that. And then when you say feifeng gramophone, that means vinyl. Or in Fulfulde, you can say Nyori gramophone, that will be vinyl, or Nyori, that will be that. So there's this interesting relationship with sort of the visuality of the raffia disc and the relationship of how it gets its, how vinyl gets its name from that cultural context. So I decided that why not just take an actual feifei and put labels on. So I picked this music by Barmani Choge, because I happened to have one time when there was a wedding in my family and spent a week with her in my bedroom and asked her all kinds of questions. Those are actually my role models. A lot of them are musicians, because coming up, I can't really point to a single person and go like, oh, look, there's a cultural icon that I can look to that's making visual art. So, so anyway, that's how I came up with these labels. And then I decided to embed audio with a chip in there that plays her music with her band. And they're a group, they only use kitchen utensils to play music, a calabash, you know, ladles and all that kind of stuff. And they sing songs like The Joy of Childbirth, Why Women Should Work, Nighttime is a Blessing. You know, it's a very sort of a cappella feminist idea that the music. So that's what this piece is about. So the funny thing is, even though it's just raffia discs, people always come up and go like, how does it play? And I always wonder, you know, and I'm like, maybe if I showed this in Nigeria, people would know exactly that it couldn't possibly, because they'll be like, but it's emitting, how does it play with the grass? You said it's grass. I'm like, so this is a bowl of yogurt, and then the projection in there is Fulani women selling yogurt in yogurt. So the container has yogurt, and then there's a literal projection of a digital image collage of women selling yogurt, and then one of them is also dreaming of selling yogurt. So there's this sort of multiplicity of the same concept. And I like this because I think one of the things we've gotten away from is with our desire to consume Western culture, including we are going, you know, as somebody smarter than me said, we're going from black people, especially in American context, being branded and sold, to now black people buying brand names and branding themselves and becoming hostage to commodities. And so I like this idea that there are simple ways where your rapper, if you're a nomad, could be your rapper by day and your blanket by night. And I like those notions, so that's why I like this idea that the yogurt, it's edible, but it's also a projection surface. So influences of sub-Saharan Africa in the work, I've highlighted just a few because we don't have all day. Early childhood in northern Nigeria, you know, it has the influence of the Middle East, the colonial West, the sub-Saharan Africa, and those things for me as a young girl in Kano Corona converged in a way that gave me permission to embrace and alter the social, the structural, and the visceral. And those times I used to ask my teacher all the time if I could take up the blackboard and do these amazing drawings that take me weeks. I don't even know why they allowed me to do that. So this is sort of why I'm sort of trying to harken back that far. Collage processes mirror traditional West African cultural appropriations in music and craft of adapting, borrowing, and innovating from multiple sources, both at home and abroad, right? This is sort of the existence of what it is for us. We're always combining things from different places. There was a time when, before they had flashlights on cell phones, I attended a wedding in Nigeria. In unison, everybody, when electricity went out, sitting at a dinner, everybody lifted their phone in unison and pushed on it, and all the tables were lit. So we are constantly living in a state of collage and innovation. It's just sort of almost innate. It isn't this thing where we're thinking, oh, this is a new thing or new idea. Sub-Saharan artisans and musicians have for centuries used sharing systems for both content and technology. Well before the 1950s and 1960s open source and the 1970s copyleft. So before this idea that you can share your ideas, musicians, artisans, let's say there's a pattern, everybody gets passed it on, everybody innovates and modifies it. We don't really have this kind of restrictive space where it's now that there's copy left, this is allowed to be used. So that's sort of what I like about that. Political intent of the work. Collage enables me to create new cultural relationships between pre-existing forms, to metaphorically glimpse into what is possible of how we can live together with our differences, just like the artworks. I have this, the twig whisk with a bulugari on the end, combined, and it functions to speak to how one time maybe you're using an electric mixer, electricity goes out, you switch to the hand, you can go back and forth, a toggling back and forth. And I think the same way of how I'm combining them, and I'm not hiding or trying to unify them completely. I like the seams. I want everybody to see that they are different, but they can coexist. Just like a Fulani girl who went to Queen's College, Yaba, Lagos. Both of those, I consider Lagos culture my culture. So I think this is how we can live together with our differences, and that's critical and important at this stage for our country and our people. Low and high art and tech coexist comfortably without attempts to absorb all differences, assimilate or homogenize, but start an honest discourse about complex histories and geographies and entanglements. At this point, all of us here, when it comes to food, we eat each other's food, regardless of what part of the country you are from. And I think that's the beginning of how we can shift into a different space culturally. The use of pre-existing requires negotiating with parts to include and what to leave out. Sometimes what is left out says more than what is included in the work, of course. For some of you that are writers, you know all about that, right? Editing out is just as important. Both in music also, the moment of silence is as important as the musical note. Amalgam processes bring me closer to the viewer, as they too have to follow the path I have renegotiated with the artwork in order to understand the fragments brought together, right? When things are combined and you can see that that comes from a different culture, that comes from another culture, or that comes from a different place, you are really almost in the same process of making as I am. You know where the seams are. You are, in essence, collaborating with me to look at the work. No excuses or masking potential conflicts or misunderstandings. All seams, iterations, sameness, and differences are visible together. It is about subversive, playful experiences and reactive, satirical paradoxes in which humor, fragility, and temporality are highlighted so that ideas and thoughts supersede permanence and salability. right? I'm not really, it's not that I'm an artist. It's not that I don't want to sell my work, but my focus when I'm making it is going to be on the ideas and what makes the idea work as opposed to saleability or permanence. Okay, now we're moving into a different kind of work that I do. This is a virtual reality piece that I did commissioned by Duke University, and it's called Desired Dwellings. And so literally when you're standing in the artwork, you can use a Wii remote and 3D glasses, and you can experience different kind of living situations, from living in a hut with a squat toilet all the way to a fancy Japanese bathroom that washes your bum. So, you know, or a dilapidated apartment in New York City. So, or a cardboard box that somebody lives in. So I wanted to sort of create an artwork that takes you on a journey in different ways that different people exist. And I was also lucky that the Human Rights Archive from the UN is housed at Duke, so I was able to get copies of a lot of images from the war in Liberia. So some people are living in conditions where their homes are shot up or blown up, and there's only certain corners of it that they live in. And what you can do is you can use the Wii to grab parts of different things that come from different living contexts and take them into other contexts, you know? So if you live in a cardboard box, it's kind of weird to have a ceiling fan, and so on and so forth. So we're gonna watch a short clip of that.
Thank you, Fatima, for an amazing presentation. And you know, with the whole multimedia thing and all of that, when you're just looking at it like that without the interactive aspect of it, it doesn't have the impact that it should have, you know. So I'm going to ask just maybe just 2 questions, then we can give the mic to the audience, because I'm sure that a whole lot of them want to engage with you. The first question that was actually born in my mind as I go through your work is, and I just saw a little bit of an exhibition of it just now, is the notion of home from an emotional point of view and the way you relate to it when you are walking, because it's not far from it, but yet you've traveled the world and you can call anywhere home. But I'm sure that you are pretty much anchored in a place that is not just a notion, but an emotional space, a physical space. And how do you relate to that on and on and on with your work?
I'm not sure how to answer that question. It will probably take a really good shrink and a lot of years. But I guess since my formative years were here, I haven't lost, or as my dad would call it, he never really wanted us to, even if you're going to go outside of the country, he doesn't want you to do it so early on. You needed to have your early childhood here, because then you can have a sense of culture. And I think it kind of stays with you, that sense of home or you know, our own cultural context. So that's the best I could do.
Thank you. I mean, it shows pretty much all over the work, you know, so the way you relate to it, the material that you use, you know, and everything kind of project where you're coming from and everything. And my second question, then I'll leave it, I'll give the mic to the audience, is at what point did you decide to take technology as your main driving force in your work?
Probably, like I mean, you saw the revolving room. Yeah. Probably around that time, my second year in college would be
undergrad.
Yeah, undergraduate school.
All right.
Would be when I started to think about both sort of, you know. Well, I guess one of the things also is I was looking at a lot of the patterns and the designs on buildings, and we seem to be a culture of patterns. So, and then sort of trying to think about fractal mathematics earlier on, but not really having quite the language for it. So it sort of came out of that, this sort of interest also with technology. And also, like, I mean, in boarding school here in Lagos, I was involved with theater a lot. So, and set building as a way to make money sometimes when I was an undergrad, because I was a sculpture major. So I think all of those things kind of culminated and came together in a way that allowed me to sort of
Explore
start
this.
focusing on technology.
Like I promised, I'm going to have questions.
As I was looking at your presentation, I was making notes. Lots of things I could identify with there. I was making notes, tech, class, gender, state power, different things, feminism. Then in the girl talk, something struck me, and I was discussing with the colleagues here. You know, in the girl talk, it's a bottle of Coke and Pepsi, you know, symbols of corporate power. I was wondering, you know, why both of them in the girl talk?
Why both Pepsi
Yes.
and
Coke.
and Coke?
Yes, that one I couldn't figure out.
Well, it's not an ad for Pepsi or Coke. So if you have both of them, they mutually exclusively could cancel each other out, right?
Yes, of course.
So the goal is, even when I'm using commodities, I'm not really trying to promote either one.
Yes, but corporate symbols of corporate power in girl talk.
Because it's a conversation about, Girl Talk is a conversation about sort of the commercial consumer goods, those that are accessible to us and those that are not, that we end up adopting in our culture. So it made sense when I was making it for me to have all those rings, you know, like these mass-produced diamond rings, and then also the Coke and the Pepsi. Does that make sense? I don't know if I answered your question. No?
There's just a minute. There's an image. You didn't project it. It was when I was looking at your work. It's untitled, but it also has Army on it, and it dates back to '96. And it's, you know, like women that selling, or you know, you could tell they are working, and all those things. Then you have these crazy helicopters and stealth and bombers floating over their head, kind of like this ominous situation. And I looked at the date. I thought it was actually a current work, you know. So I looked at the date and saw that you did it in '96. What was going on then? I mean, considering what is happening right now, I mean, like there has never been a time where there have not been tension, but it's more palpable now. It's crazier now, you know. So, and you know, why did you do that work then? Was it relating to what you call Nigeria, or was it a global statement when you made that work?
I think it's a combination of all kinds of things, you know. It's just sort of this relationship between one, you know, like, so the people in the military people and the helicopters and everything in that image are shrunken down. You know,
smaller down.
They're like almost like a little big. Well, they're bigger than ants, but they're almost like insects. And then the women are sitting and they're going through a process of dehusking grain. And the point of it is sort of usually what's prominent in any sort of presence of military is the military itself.
Yeah.
And I sort of think the polar opposite is sort of either the voice of women or the presence of women.
Okay.
So I wanted to sort of heighten and create an alternative imaginary where I imagine a world where the voices of women, and especially Black African women, being more heard and more present, and also even their labor not being a thankless labor, because I think a lot of labor that women engage in still within this cultural context is one that's thankless, you know. Hi.
Fatima.
Hello.
It was wonderful watching you and listening to you talk about your work.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you didn't have a lot of role models, I guess by way of female visual artists, and you had to adopt musicians, which I think is quite strange, rather weird. and it does make the journey that little bit harder, I imagine. But I just wanted to know, how have you negotiated that, kind of being a trailblazer? I mean, I've recently come in contact with artists like Altume Ghana, Miriam Oyawe from northern Nigeria. But I wonder what you, for instance, having had some distance, having lived outside Nigeria for some time, when you, and you've now visited, what do you think can be done to support young northern Nigerian girls who want to become visual artists, who want to kind of find their own space, creative space to operate within northern Nigeria?
Wow, that's loaded. I think that, so one of the things that's needed is not just in even northern Nigeria. I don't know if that has changed, but as I told you, I went to Queen's College. But this idea that art is something to fill empty slots in the curriculum is not a good idea, because cultural production is something that I think should be revered and considered to be central and important to our growth.
Yeah.
Because yes, we do study math, English, sciences,
Chemistry.
whatever else, but without understanding our own culture and how we can become producers of our own culture, I think we're kind of left with a gaping hole. So I think it has to be done through education and alteration of curriculum. I think it has to be done with a government that understands, because I don't think any individual can do it. There has to be more support and understanding and conservation of our own histories, instead of it being transient, that our histories don't matter, our cultures don't matter, we'll make new things later. I think all of these have to be, it's almost like a bunch of things that have to come together for that to happen. I actually don't find it as weird to sort of look to musicians, because I think whether it's literature or music, all of the arts have like a common core. I'm a professor of foundation studies, so there's a core there that allows for you really to learn from any kind of artist. But yeah, those are the people that I looked to, and two of whose music clips I ended up playing. But yeah, I think I think those are the things we need. It's just that culture has such a low place in our
culture.
Yes, in our culture, country. Like culture is not considered important, and I think a shift in that would make a difference.
Do you feel a responsibility to support young people in northern Nigeria? Just a question.
Not just northern Nigeria. Anytime you want, I'll come to Nigeria and teach. And I've said that in I'm all for doing my part and helping if I can. I just don't know exactly how. Because I can't just show up in any school and get in a room and start
Teaching.
ordering people around or something.
We'll organize a festival or something like that.
Yeah.
To invite you.
Yeah. And anytime, so if you think about the talk that I gave in Mali, one time I was there, and there was a bunch of teenagers that were going to go, they were 11, 12, and 13. They were all going to go to Paris for the first time to study, and I was invited over just to talk to them about what my experiences are in terms of leaving your own culture and going and living somewhere else. So I showed up. It's not, it wasn't about getting paid or something, but it was about allowing some young Africans, and unfortunately those were all young men, no women, but it's about being able to, I make myself available and very open to showing up and doing that. And I've done that a bunch of times in Mali, because they've made it, if I show up, they create other circumstances that they want me to do this or that. So if the opportunities are there, I will definitely participate. Thank you. Great question.
I have a question. Do you have any material or idea that is sacrosanct that you don't want to touch? Because I look at through your body of work, not that you have to address everything, but I realize that nothing is close to, apart from probably the Islamic slate that you used, nothing is remotely close to religion at all. It's something that it seems like you just kind of sidestep. It's there, but, so is that a sacrosanct thing that you don't want to
It's not about
engage
it
with?
being sacrosanct. It's a question of my own, like I work with what I know best, right? So
Okay.
I'm not I didn't study religion per se beyond what everybody normally does in Nigeria.
Okay.
And the way that I look at it is I went to Kano Corona and I was in Christmas plays and went to Quranic school after in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then I went to Convent of the Holy Family in Littlehampton in Sussex in England. So the idea that if you're familiar with Ali Mazroui's work, he says only in Africa would you find, he was interviewing this woman who is Catholic,
Yeah.
and she on the wall had these Quranic verses because her husband has married a second wife and she doesn't want him, and this malam is really good, the mullah, so she went to see him. He will stop him from marrying a third wife. So it's only in this context that you have these sort of cultural convergences. So I'm not sure that, I'm not interested in making religious art. I'm not a religious artist. I'm sort of more interested in how we can live together with our differences than I am interested in making religious art. Also, even the political work that I make, I'm not really interested in preaching at you or beating you over the head with ideas of
yeah.
preaching. I'm sort of interested in the subtle nuances of culture than I am.
That was what I was actually leaning towards,
Yeah.
that subtlety in those multiplicity of a Christian woman having those things on the wall, so creating montage in those various ways, so that was what I was referencing.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yes, at the beginning of your presentation with your earlier works, I could vividly relate with some of your works, given that some time back I was an art student at King's College. But nonetheless, I love your work because I find in it creativity and some power that ought to be communicated in the arts. My question, however, goes this way. Vividly, culture is raw material for technology, because technology is the logic of craft. And I don't know whether you're having conversations as regards the merger between the realms of art and the realms of application, whether your work can create a new technology that finds a merger between Western models and some of our somewhat archaic African models, whether there is a conversation as regards new technology through your art form.
Absolutely. So one of the things I'm currently working on is figuring out, say, for example, how I can capture and document a lot of traditional crafts and thinking of how to innovate with them using new technologies. So that's definitely something I'm interested in, and I'm thinking of the possibility in the future of building some kind of West African center that specifically
Create those things.
deals with that, both archives processes as well as figure out how to innovate with them, and also I'm starting to really think of how to make those indigenous approaches sexy to younger people so that they can try to engage them. Thank you. Excellent question. But then I'm not surprised. You're from my brother's school.
Yeah, one final question, so then.
Congratulations for a successful presentation.
Thank you.
I'll be a bit biased as a Fulani man.
Watch out.
Yeah, I've observed from your presentation some of the objects you've used, from the calabash to the fefe you've used. I can relate to a lot of things. So there's a lot of bad praise, a lot of negative things being written about the Fulani people. So as an artist, do you see do you have any sense of responsibility using your own work to kind of, change that narrative that it's been, because based on what is happening in the country recently, as you said, it has never been this crazy. So it's not anywhere you call Fulani now that people will find it funny. so like, I wonder if you're thinking in that line. And to Victor, who is also an artist from the southern part of the country, have you considered some kind of collaboration to, work with artists from northern Nigeria and southern part of the country to sort of internalize some of this work? Because I see most artists try to just come up with their work and export it outside the country. Meanwhile, some of these things you're saying, Jafet was asking me do I know the song that you use, the Barmani Choge song? I said, yeah, I know it. And I think you use Garba, which is
Haruna Oji.
Haruna Oji, yeah. So, like, for us growing up in this generation, there's a lot of, I think, responsibility on us to try to, change this bad, the negative things that are being written, whether you're a Fulani man or you're from northern Nigeria. I think the artists should, take the responsibility, since, our politicians and the leaders have failed to provide this kind of to take the responsibility and behind us provide a platform for our artists to grow. So I think you understand where I'm going
Yes.
to. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you just answered your own question by being here and asking it. And my being here already projects a different kind of image of what a Fulani person is, that's not a land grabber or something like that, But I mean, one of the things is with populations explosions around the globe, a lot of indigenous people that have kept traditional ways of being are under siege in terms of both the ability to have access to land or passage. And so it's not just the Fulanis. I think if you go globally, you'll see that that's not uncommon. But I think what we're doing right now, you and I here, is projecting a different image, right? For people to see that there's another way to be. And then about the commission that you're gonna give us to collaborate, I'm really interested in that.
We're waiting for it.
So anyway, you answer that question.
I mean, like she said, just two of us, Kadiria putting two of us together, by, like, she challenged me a year ago and I challenged her as well, and she called me. I was like, I'm traveling. She's like, no, you can't, you understand? So I have to cancel everything I was doing because I was the one that challenged her first. I'm like, let's do this, and the time has come. So two of us sitting down here, you have to realize that the way we have to quickly realize that you don't want to be a puppet in a puppet show that you are not part of, because somebody is dangling something and moving things around and we keep dancing all the time, So this is our way of saying, okay, there was a construct, there was a geographical construct, we have cultural differences, but at the end of the day, we also have a meeting point where, like, the works that she creates, I mean, like, there could be tension, but they are sitting there together. So it's left for you to, like, figure out how do these things that have differences now coming together, how do they work in one particular canvas? So if we look at it from that perspective, I think we move faster to a peaceful coexistence than we are at the moment.
Hi.
Okay, I did see most of your work because I came late.
Careful.
But from what I hear everybody talking about is this art, helping to influence us, to bring us together and all that. Art, the audience for art is very limited in this country, and I think in most of the world too. It's more an elitist thing. What Nigeria needs today is to get out there to people, majority, to the masses, And the masses, I would say, they're like 80%, those who can really afford to have access to art. Partly because of this culture that he's talking about. Because in our culture, that's not something we go into and all that. It wasn't like that before. Because growing up, I'm from Edo State, growing up, I know culture is very, art is a very essential part of our life. That's what we do. So, but now I see it as a very elitist thing. So if you want to pass a message in Nigeria, I don't know if it's through art, and if it's going to be through art, how do you want to do it with your own art?
Well, I don't ever think there's only
Get
one.
down there to the people.
I don't think there's only one way
Because
to.
you know, there's a message, sorry, that we need to pass concerning this Fulani thing, Islam, Christianity. I grew up in the north. I was born in Lagos. I grew up in the north. All my schooling was in the north. I speak Hausa. So, and then I also understand and speak Yoruba. You know, and I'm also from Edo State. So you see my confusion. I have friends all across. Yes, and all these friends of mine are enemies today. You know.
Well, I was born in the north in Kaduna, and I went to Queen's College, and my friends are from all over. But going back to this question of elitism, as you can see, well, maybe you didn't see, using local artists, the work that local artisans make, and bringing it into the context of the so-called elitist art is my way of trying to elevate the crafts that indigenous local people are doing. Being here today, wearing indigenous, locally produced garments are part of how I try to elevate those ideas. You know, so I don't really think of it as us and them or high and low. I think that there is a way that those things can be brought together. So I may be here giving this talk in this elitist place, but a lot of the shots of the images and the work that you see are produced on the ground, locally. A lot of the objects that I use are produced on the ground locally, and I go back and I share the work that I've made with people locally and let them know that this is being shown in this culture, this country, and what it is. So I'm not really disconnected or detached from local artisans and crafts people, but because I'm just one woman and I cannot just say, well, this is elitist, I'm not gonna do it. What I'm doing is I'm creating a context where I move back and forth between those two spaces as a way to bring them closer together, to connect them. Thank you.
I'll speak very briefly on that as well. I mean, there are interventions here and there that we're also in this room and all of those things, that whole elitist thing, you know. So, you know, me, for instance, I'm going to Benin tomorrow. I'm going to be giving a talk, and we're going to be working with students along Egun Street to reawaken the importance of Egun Street. And it's not the first time that intervention is being done. I've had shows in Egun Street where we make work with the people in Egun Street, with Taye here, who is also from Benin. We have explored that whole narrative. We have gone back and embraced it, and we are going to show it back to those that are living there and create a different kind of experience whereby we are actually on the street, you know. So there are a whole lot of other artist friends of mine that are going back to those ways and everything, and making sure that they are engaged and everything and stuff like that. And the people we are working with are being acknowledged. So it's no longer whereby you see a classic African work from Benin, from Ife, and it doesn't have a name. It doesn't have any name attached to it, just like a region. But now there are actually names that are attached to the works that we are working, that we are doing, and the people we are working with in the communities.
I think we need both people abroad, here, everywhere. Yeah. Just like the same way people always ask me that I'm making work that seems to have political context as an artist, and that isn't relevant, that why not go into politics? That's how you're going to affect change. Change is affected by all of us doing different things from where we reside, right? So if you look at sort of, Miriam Makeba, I don't think Miriam Makeba didn't affect change. She did as an artist. And it's not just people who are in politics. It's not just going to be the politicians. Everybody has to bring what they have to the problem, and we all have to work together to make it work. So I'm willing to put myself in the context of local on the ground with craftspeople. I was at the tie-dye wells day before yesterday in Kano, working with the people there closely, you know, for a work I'm producing. And I'm here today in this room in a fancy hotel. And when I go back, I went to a village also. So I mean, I move seamlessly, endlessly between these kinds of spaces, and I also try to talk to them about what they're doing and how we can share as creatives? Thank you. Lovely question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm humbled.
For making me to come and spend my weekend in Lagos. When I got the invitation, my plan was to continue on to Abuja and have a restful weekend. But when I saw the CB, I read the CB and I said, but why this woman? I have to see her.
Well,
and
thank
I think
you.
that, but it also struck me one of the points you said, which was that you go to where you are invited. And I think that we have to appreciate Kadria for inviting
Absolutely.
you, for bringing you to Nigeria.
Yes.
And I think that earlier on we were discussing with Mohammed about why is it that Nigerians don't appreciate their own people. And I think that this is really a testimony of the fact that we have so many talented Nigerians all over the world.
Absolutely.
But we don't know them. The only people that we know are the politicians, the people who squander our money and make the bad names for us all over the country. So I want to appreciate you, appreciate Kadria for creating this opportunity for you to be introduced to Nigeria. And we're very excited and very glad to have you.
I'm deeply humbled. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
And I'm not sure that many people will appreciate this. As a Kanuri man, to come to a Fulani event is not an
Sterling Bank has decided to take a view that there is an opportunity for us to collaborate, those of us on the business side and those on the creative side. And the reason we've done that is that we feel that the inspiration that is required for us to succeed as a society is not going to come from business alone. But we also know that the reflection that comes from the creative part of the society in itself cannot transform a society. So we do need to come to that point where the stories that is being told, it is the story that we tell about ourselves, where we are coming from, and how those stories inspire us and inspire those of us that may not be as blessed as Fatima Tuga. But somehow the work that she does can form the foundation for us doing the things that we do in a manner that is more socially conscious, but also that delivers better results. So this is not a charity work. This is our own way of finding common ground so that the society can move forward. I think every form, every form that you work with, every format, every platform is an opportunity for you to convey something. Your art can be meaningful, but for a society like ours, we need to weaponize all the work that we do. We need every single piece of work that we put out there to be a weapon that seeks to change the society. And we also need the work that we do as businesses to also be weaponized, meaning that you can still make money as a business, but what are the material changes that you are creating that you may not benefit from as a business, but it is creating the platform for the society to move ahead. And so I stand here pledging our support, but demanding in return that the work we do should go out there not just for entertainment, not just to inform, not just to tell the story of the past, but to equip all of us so that we write the story of the future.